Let's talk more about the release of the Blue Drop report. Bring in now the University of South Africa's water management expert, Professor Anja Du Plessis. A very good evening to you, Professor. Good to have your time on News at Prime. So, having heard what we got from the Minister's briefing today in the Blue Drop report, when government speaks of this 46% of water in South Africa, drinking water, being or not being microbiologically safe, what does that mean really?
Look, first, let us congratulate the 26 of the 950 water supply systems which actually achieved the Blue Drop certification. In terms of the microbiological compliance, that contributes 70%, and then your chemical 30%. It's measured against the minimum requirements of our South African National Standards 241 of 2015, which basically looks at the minimum requirements of drinking water. So when looking at the statistics, compliance monitoring only takes place in 29% of water supply systems, while 71% fails. So that even paints a darker picture than the 46% that do not comply overall. This basically means that there are acute health microbiological determinants that pose immediate and acceptable health risks if present at values above those given limits as specified in the SANS 241. Basically, it's not only related to fecal contamination, which is basically your sewage, but also some organisms like Legionella that grows into water pipes, as well as others that occur in source waters, and which may cause outbreaks in individual cases, and then also other microbes such as cyanobacteria that requires management approaches, specific ones based on each context.
What are the implications, though, of the stat for the communities who rely on these water sources?
Well, it's very concerning, as these acute health risks and infectious diseases are caused by pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and then as well as parasites as well. We saw what happened in Hammanskraal. I don't think that anyone wants that to be repeated. And from these statistics, it should come at no surprise that the Hammanskraal community suffered such trauma at the beginning of the year. Some of the primary health risks include gastro illnesses, where your diarrhea is usually being the prime symptom. Other primary waterborne illnesses which communities should look out for is obviously cholera, dysentery, hepatitis A, and then typhoid, to just name a few.
And this regression, a severe regression has been called, happened between 2014 and 2023, the period under this latest review of the Blue Drop report. Are we clear enough on the reasons for the regression within a period of almost 10 years?
Well, there has been reasons that have been supplied. Those are the usual reasons that myself and other water experts have been highlighting and raising the alarm for more than the past decade. Some of these include poor operations, defective infrastructure, like we know, inadequate dosing rates of chemicals, absence of disinfection chemicals, the lack of monitoring, which is a huge issue, because you cannot manage what you do not know. And most of these water supply systems also do not notify the communities that they are not complying or that some kind of contamination did take place. So you're basically sitting with dilapidated infrastructure, poor operations and management, and then the lack of skills as well as qualifications, just to name a few.
Who then takes responsibility, I'm wondering, in cases especially when the communities who may be affected by the poor quality of this water, which in some instances may be completely unsafe, who takes responsibility for exposing people to the potential harm, and what becomes the set of consequences that they face or the relevant entity would face as a result?
Well, if you look at our constitution, the government is responsible to provide communities with clean and safe drinking water according to Section 27. But if you look at the National Water Act as well as the Water Services Act, local municipalities are basically the ones that are responsible for providing clean drinking water. The Department of Water and Sanitation, as the primary custodian of our water resources, they, at the end of the day, the buck stops with them. So they need to, at this point in time, enforce the legislation and enforce accountability and actually show their teeth at this point in time to make sure that all of these water supply systems, that there are some sort of accountability, whether it be penalties or even court action.
I'm glad you mentioned the issue of basically showing teeth, because also quite alarming from this Blue Drop update is the fact that about 14 water service authorities did not provide the relevant data to the Water Department in order for it to be assessed. Where does that leave us? And most importantly, where does that leave the affected communities?
Well, in terms of the affected communities, it actually just leaves them powerless and in some instances hopeless. At this point in time, it doesn't even seem that protests that last for 6 months in some instances, like in Pushback Ridge, is actually getting any attention anymore. So that is a major issue, which I have also highlighted to the Director General and said that the department needs to look at the current legislation and see where the gaps are so that they can actually start and firstly, plug the gaps and then actually enforce the legislation so that municipalities are actually held accountable.
And Professor Du Plessis, do the likes of the Director General, the Minister, even people at provincial and city level, do they heed the advice and warnings from experts such as yourself to make sure that water quality in this country is kept to the very highest standard?
Look, in some cases they do, but usually it takes taking them to court. I'm just an associate professor at the university, so I try to create awareness with engaged scholarship and just, try to empower communities with knowledge as well as awareness. Because if you are basically sitting in the dark, you can't do anything. But with knowledge, with the appropriate knowledge, by knowing who to go to and knock onto which door, that empowers you, and hopefully that will bring some positive change. But what we need to do is to consistently place continuous pressure on government as well as local municipalities to adhere to the standards. The standards are there. It's nothing new. It's been showing a clear deterioration from 2013-2014 period, and I think most communities have had enough. I think the Hammanskraal has been an unfortunate example of what the consequences of this can be.
Professor Anja Du Plessis, good to have your time. Professor Du Plessis is with the University of South Africa, speaking to us as a water expert tonight following the release of the Blue Drop report by the Water Minister, Senzo Mchunu, earlier.